Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into this conversation because so many people talk about mental health, but you talk about brain health and neurofeedback and all the things in between. And I want to get into like what are the differences and so on and so forth. But let's start out with who's Melissa today? And I want to break down how you got there because I think your story is fascinating.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, where should I start? Like where I'm from? What do you want to know?
Yeah, tell me a little bit about who you are today. Like what do you do? What talk about your franchises, do all that stuff.
Okay. All right. So today I live in Atlanta and I own a company that I started 10 years ago, well, almost 10 and a half years ago now, called Braintrain Centers. It's all neurofeedback. We'll get into what that is in a little bit. I started it because I knew I wanted to help people heal in a natural way, help people get off medications, maybe not have to get on them. And about a year ago, I decided I wanted to grow the business further into the world, and I couldn't do it myself. So I spoke to an old business coach, and he's like, why don't you look into business licensing and how that looks in that model? Because it's different than franchise. So you said franchise. I don't own a franchise company. I own a company that I license the business. So what I did is I just announced pretty much on Facebook, hey, if you want to own a Brain Train Centers, I have an option for you to do that. Contact me. I did this a year ago, and since last year, we've opened 18 new locations.
It's
So,
great. Like, talk about crazy growth, right? But I love the idea that you wanted to help people heal. Like, that was the first thought process when you got into this. But you're talking 10 years ago. Like, you start to see neurofeedback stuff like in the last 6 months. Like,
mhm.
before that, nobody was talking about it. What was your introduction to what neurofeedback is?
Yeah, so my original plan was to become a chiropractor. And so since I was in high school, I'm like, I want to be a chiropractor. I started working for them when I was in college because I'm like, if I'm going to be one, I want to understand the business and learn, how to run that part. So I moved to Georgia. I enrolled in chiropractic school. I did a year of chiropractic and I was like, ew, I don't want to do this. I don't want to touch people. So I'm like, all right, well, the only option I have is like my most experience is working for chiropractors. So I found a chiropractor in Georgia and I started working for him at his front desk. I had experience for over 10 years doing that. And then he's like, oh, we have this neurofeedback. And I was like, what is that? Like, I wasn't the nerdy type that knew all about the brain stuff. I knew about chiropractic. And I was like, can I learn about that? Can I get certified? He's like, sure, I would love for you to. So I got certified. I worked for him for a year and a half, and I helped him grow his business double the size. So he actually
Wow.
moved his neurofeedback office out of his chiropractic office and created a standalone neurofeedback clinic where he had two rooms going at once because I just was like, I fell in love with it. I got the opportunity to help him build his business. And then I was like, I wonder if I could do this on my own. And I contacted the company and I said, I want to open my own. What does that look like? They're like, sure, go ahead. I was like, wait, I don't have any money. I was like, how do I start a business with no money? So me being me, I enrolled back in school and I got a student loan, which I wouldn't recommend this, but it's the way I did it. And I took a $4,000 check out for a student loan and I started my business. So I unenrolled in school and used that student loan money.
Wow. Just like talk about hacking the system in order to grow what is now a booming business for you. And I love that whole entire story, right? And obviously understanding like, okay, I got into this thing that most people didn't know what it was. So I want to
Mhm.
talk about, first of all, what is neurofeedback? Like, tell my audience like what it is so they kind of understand the depth of what we're talking about. And then I want to talk to the fact of like you built a business and grew it massively without really like without the education out there in the world. I want to talk about how you did that as well. I don't even know if I made sense there, but you get what I'm
Yeah,
saying. So
yeah,
talk a
yeah.
little bit about what is neurofeedback and why is it important for people to get?
Sure. And just the quick explanation, it's been around since the 1960s. So even though it's getting popular now, that's how life goes, especially with health and wellness therapies that don't use medication or covered by insurance, because it's not usually. It was created in the 1960s. It was created for seizure disorders, actually. So they started doing more and more research on how the brain functions. And so what we do is actually a client will come in and we put this funky little cap. Actually, I have one right here, so I'll show you. Show and tell. See this?
There it
Yeah,
is.
there's a cap. Okay, so that's called a QEEG cap. And so most people think about brain activity when they see like on a show or they know someone that's had a sleep study done. and they put all those little sensors all over the head. That's exactly what this cap is. So we just put the cap on and we record brain activity in 12 different areas of the brain while you're awake. Because we want to see how your brain is processing. Is it processing too fast, too slow, kind of like idle, that type of thing. So there's 4 major brain waves that we record. Once we do that, the person comes in, we go over their results. It comes up with this 13-page report, and then it helps us determine which areas of the brain need to learn how to work in a new speed. The way we do that is through an audio-visual feedback in the office. So we don't do counseling. We are literally working like what I say is the hardware of the brain, where we are helping the brain learn how to process in different speeds to make sure that people are getting better results with attention, focus, sleep, cognitive function, things like that.
Yeah, so you actually focus a lot on, not that you can't help anybody, but you focus a lot on people with ADD. So talk a little bit about obviously what the brain is doing when you have ADD and why potentially medication is not the answer.
Yeah. So as you know, and everyone knows, like ADD, ADHD is really highly diagnosed, especially for children, young children. It's getting younger and younger. And a lot of people don't realize this, but ADHD medication is a stimulant drug. So think about that. Most people think ADHD, ADD means your brain's going too fast. They can't shut down. It's actually the complete opposite of that. When you have classic ADD or ADHD, it's because your brain's functioning too slow. So you're given a stimulant drug to make your brain go into a faster processing pattern. So if I do a brain map on someone, I'm not a doctor, so I can't diagnose, but I could do a brain map or a QEG, what I just explained, and we could see, is the brain functioning too slow or too fast? And if it's too slow, that's most likely attention disorders, things like that. If it's too fast, that's most likely anxiety disorder, which can cause attention problems. But if you give someone with anxiety a stimulant drug, their brain's already overstimulated. So you're actually causing more issues. That's when you'll hear stories of people saying, like, oh, I got on the ADHD meds and it turned me into like so angry or so irritable. And that's because their brain was probably in too high of a functioning pattern. And then they thought it was ADHD because they couldn't focus, but it was really because of anxiety.
Mm.
So it's very interesting. And most of the world doesn't know that until they hear like how your brain actually functions and what medications actually do to the brain. So ADHD meds do work if the actual diagnosis is classic ADHD.
That's fascinating because so I didn't even know that piece about the anxiety and all those things. And so obviously, look, you get this piece of data, and then what next? Like if I were to come into a Braintrain center, which again they're all over, and I'm actually I think we're going to one. Like 4 of us from the mastermind are all kind
Huh,
of going together so we can find out how
right.
broken we are.
Yeah.
And so we'll go in and get the brain scan. Like obviously we talked specifically about the ADD thing, but what about the everyday person who doesn't suffer from this? What are some of the benefits of them going in and getting their brain scanned? Like, because I'm all about any kind of hack you can possibly have in life in order to move everything forward, whether that's business, relationships, life. Like, give me a hack. Like, why would somebody who doesn't suffer from ADD go in and do this?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like why would you work out, right? Because we want to keep our bodies and our brains healthy, and our brain controls everything in the body, obviously. It's the motherboard of the central nervous system, your brain and your spine. If they're not working correctly, you're going to have a lot of issues, right? Even down into your gut, all of it. So, what I always tell people is why, you get your cholesterol checked, you get your blood pressure checked, why not get your brain checked? So, that's number one is just do a yearly checkup of how your brain is functioning. It takes 30 minutes, no pain. It's not like an MRI. You sit there with your eyes closed and then your eyes open. Very simple and easy to do, and a lot more affordable, even though insurance doesn't cover it. And then what happens is we could see how we could even improve in peak performance areas. So there's a lot of athletes that use neurofeedback, specifically one that came out recently on Netflix is Kirk Cousins for the Minnesota Vikings in the show on quarterback, he talks about how he does the neurofeedback just for peak performance and attention, not because he has ADHD, but really getting in the zone. And so when your brain is functioning better, everything else works better. You sleep better. And a lot of people also don't understand that they think they sleep because they sleep through the night, and sleep's probably one of the biggest issues for people, and they don't realize it. They think they get 6 or 7 hours of sleep, but they're not actually getting the cycles of sleep the way they should. And that's because their brain isn't learning how to shut down completely in those slowest brain activities during the sleep. And that's where your brain heals. So if you're not sleeping, you're not healing, you're not removing toxins that we take in from the day. So there's just so many benefit of seeing how your brain's functioning and then having that option to do something about it.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about like, okay, what do we, we get the scan, we see some of the issues. What do we do next? Like you hit me at the core with the sleep thing, right? So I have a sleep tracker that I have,
Mhm.
and I don't get into deep sleep very often. Like I'm a very light sleeper, and I'm rocking like 3 minutes a night, like sometimes on deep sleep.
Mhm.
Like I'm a broken sleeper, is what I'm saying. So let's talk a little bit about like some of the things you can start to change in your life in order to perform at that peak performance, like Kirk
Yeah.
Cousins.
Yes, exactly. So obviously there's things you could do at home, like outside of neurofeedback. Let's say you didn't want to do neurofeedback. So first, what you said is having a sleep tracker is really important because you don't know if you're actually getting into the deep sleep, and you hit it right there. Is like deep sleep is where you heal the most. You definitely need more than 3 minutes. I don't
It's not
know
enough. You said three
no.
minutes isn't enough.
Definitely not. I don't know the exact amount of time you're supposed to have deep sleep. I actually should look that up, but I know it's like I have a client who is in Arizona. When she first started, she was about 17 minutes of deep sleep. Now she's up to an hour and a half of deep sleep.
Wow.
Yeah, doing neurofeedback. So obviously, neurofeedback I highly recommend because it's training your brain to switch those gears. Neurofeedback can be done in office, or we have home units. I'll explain how that's done in a second. But some of the other things you could do at home, magnesium is a great supplement for sleep. A lot of people take melatonin, and actually, melatonin, depending on how much you take, could have the opposite reaction
It's
for
terrible, by
people.
the way. Like I did some research. So I do use magnesium, which my 3 minutes of deep sleep doesn't say that I do.
Yeah.
But so I use a BioOptimizer's magnesium, which is like some of the best stuff. Shout out to BioOptimizers, former sponsor of the show. But it's great. It's great stuff. Now, on the flip side, I did some research about melatonin. I never took melatonin, but I actually found out that it actually messes with your hormones, like long term. Like it'll actually add estrogen to men. So like
Uh-huh.
your testosterone will drop and you'll get more estrogen. So like you have to be really careful. These things that they say are natural and good for you, it's not the case.
Yeah, and also you as an adult should not be taking more than 3 milligrams of melatonin. And guess what they sell it? They sell it at 10 milligrams.
Wow.
And most of the time when you're buying supplements from like a Target, Walmart, Costco, it's just full of petroleum and additives, and it's a big waste of money. So you're right, like buying from a good company like the one you just shouted out, knowing the amount your body needs. So going to a specialist. So we actually refer out to specialists that he could either could do blood testing, like Lizzie Ends, someone like that that could do blood testing, check hormones, check balances of vitamins and minerals. So being very careful about what you're putting into your body. Also getting enough vitamin D. Vitamin D actually helps create sleep spindles for later in the night. So unfortunately, during the winter, in some places you don't get that as much. So taking the vitamin D supplement can help with that. But going outside is obviously the best way to get that. So there's great things that you could do, intake in your body, whether it's food or supplements. Working out obviously is wonderful, but working out not too close to bedtime. And one thing for sure that I know all of us have a problem with, including myself, is not being on your devices right before bed. Because what you're actually doing is increasing your beta waves, which is your like over aroused waves, as you're trying to teach your brain to go into the slow waves. So having the TV on, having your phone in your face, you're actually stimulating your brain. And a lot of people will fall asleep to the TV or the phone. That's because they've trained their brain to do that, but that means they're getting bad sleep through the night. So that's they say 1 hour before bedtime you should not be on devices.
Yeah, and I'm sure I'm a I'm a victim. I'm a victim of that. But I'm
Here.
sure 99% of the people listening to this show all stare at our phones until we go to sleep. And then you have some people that go in, like the second I'm in bed, I don't touch my phone. But like some people lay in bed and they'll just scroll for hours and hours and hours, and there's no way you're getting good sleep after that for sure. So is this something with your centers, if somebody were to go into one of your centers, and we'll get into where they can go later, but like get on your website and find out where they all are. But when somebody comes into the center and gets the scan, do you give them next steps? Is that part of the process?
Yeah, yeah. So that's where the neurofeedback therapy part comes in. So the initial is just the assessment, and it helps us determine which area of the brain needs to be trained and what brain activity needs to be trained either up or down. So our software actually gives us a specific protocol for your brain. The way that it actually works, it's a little harder to explain, but we do have videos on the website you can watch to help you understand. I'm going to try to simplify it. Most of us know from college about Pavlov's dogs. Do you remember learning about that, Pavlov's dogs and
I
the
didn't go to
dogs?
college, so you've lost me there.
Well, dang it. All right. Let's break it down this way. Let's talk about positive reward systems. We know, all of us know that when you try to train a dog, a toddler to use the restroom, things like that, you give a reward. And every time you give a reward, it's creating a motivation to create a new behavior. Well, there's also something you could do for the brain using neurofeedback. And so when you sit down in an office, you're actually hooked up to little sensors in the area of the brain that needs training or exercise. And then you're watching a screen in front of you. Every time your brain goes into the pattern that we want it to, you get a positive reward on the screen in front of you. So it's a live time. That's where the word feedback comes from. It's called a closed loop of feedback that the brain is in control of. So you're watching your favorite show, your favorite movie. Every time your brain goes into the correct pattern, the screen is bright and the volume is loud. So you're
Wow.
getting a live time feedback directly to the brain saying, good job, brain, keep doing that. And then when the brain goes into a pattern we don't want, the screen actually turns dark and the volume goes down. So it's a, a loop of 30 minutes of feedback training the actual brain waves. Then that creates new pathways in the brain and a new behavior in the actual brain.
That is fascinating. Like to be able to go, okay, and it's almost like you can then use that in your day to day, right? Like
Yeah,
you're learning how to control how your brain is functioning. That's
yeah.
so fascinating to me. And I actually now I can't fucking wait to go and do this now. So because there
Yeah.
is one in Pennsylvania, so I have a
Yeah.
huge following in Pennsylvania. Shout out a little bit to some of the locations you guys have. Hawaii,
Yeah.
by the way,
We
sick.
do. Yes, Hawaii is sick. So, Pennsylvania, we have Doylestown, which is awesome. And the girl that owns the Doylestown location used to work for me for 2.5 years down in Georgia.
Oh
And
wow.
then she moved back home to Doylestown and she's like, I miss doing neurofeedback. I want to open an office. So she just opened a few months ago, doing good, ramping up. So thank you for supporting her. And then some of our first ones, actually, our very first one obviously was in Georgia. Then we opened up San Diego. And with San Diego, we started that 7 years ago with one of my great friends from high school. And we added a nonprofit side of the business called Healing Our Heroes. So that's where that started. We see veterans and first responders that have PTSD or brain injury cost free if they can't afford it, that type of thing.
Yeah,
So San Diego, and then last year, our very first licensed one was in not Honolulu, but North Shore, Hawaii, which is up in Haleiwa. And then she just opened her second one down in Honolulu. So there's two in Hawaii now.
very cool.
Um, we have four in Texas. We have Oklahoma, St. Louis, two in Minnesota, two in Florida, one in St. Augustine, one in St. Pete, one in Hilton Head, and one in Houma, Louisiana, and one in Kentucky. And I'm in San Diego right now. The background is San Diego, my hometown. We are opening up a second one this week in Northern County of San Diego.
That's so cool. And this speaks to, your ability as an entrepreneur and a woman who is able to kind of build this huge business. And I want to get into that journey a little bit with you, right? Like a lot of people hear this and go, wow, like Melissa's a rock star, right? She's gone on to build all of this great things. She's doing good things. By the way, shout out to you being an impact driven entrepreneur. Everything is about, helping others, which is why obviously you being a part of Skeleton Key Mastermind is just a no brainer, right? Like, because you just bring so much to the table for everybody involved. And I love that about you. So with that being said, I want to talk a little bit about your journey, because I think sometimes people hear the entrepreneurial journey and the path, and they're like, "Oh, I'm not that person. I can't do that."
Mm.
And you weren't raised in a way that this seems like, okay, this seems easy or whatever. Talk a little bit about your past. What drew you into entrepreneurship? Like all the things that you were able to overcome in order to build this massive business.
Okay, thank you. And a lot of people say like, "Oh, you're from San Diego, you must have a lot of money," because everyone thinks everyone in California is rich. Not
Well,
true.
none of them are now because it's so damn expensive.
True. Well, that's true. Yeah, exactly. And I heard that San Diego's the most expensive city as of right now in the US, even over
Yep.
like and everything. But there is a hood to San Diego. And I was raised in the hood, actually. My mom was a single mom. My dad was a heroin addict. I was raised by a family that was just hustlers. Like all we knew how to do was survive. We were always in survival mode, especially my mom. And that's what I watched happen. And that's what I thought was normal. So from the age of 14, I was working even before I started high school. I would ride the city bus an hour and a half down to the beach, sell seashells at the beach.
Unreal.
um, yeah, and I mean, but like that was like I said, that was normal to me. And like my friends were from the nicer areas and they're like, yeah, we don't really want to come pick you up in your area because it was not a safe area. Like there were drive-bys, there was always helicopters. I was the white girl Melissa in the hood, and that's actually what they called me. And here's the thing, again, I thought that was normal and it was all good and everybody watched out for me. And I will say, like, I never felt in danger because everyone around always watched out for me. But it taught me a lot of street smarts. It taught me a lot of hustle. It taught me a lot of drive. And it taught me, like, even watching my family, I don't want to talk bad about my family, but a lot of the people that I looked up to made some really bad choices in their life. So I did watch them and I'm like, I don't want to be like that. Like, that's not who I'm going to be. So all my life, I'm like, I'm just going to hustle. I'm going to make my money. I'm going to keep going. And I am one day going to own my own business because that's what I know I'm meant to do. And so that's pretty much what I did. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I did not learn business in the regular sense of what, an entrepreneur is. And I've made a lot of mistakes over the past 10 years, and I still am making some that I'm having to correct, but that's part of being an entrepreneur. And the one thing that I've definitely learned the most in this past year of bringing so many people into the company is how important communication is. And that I also can't expect other people to have the same hustle and drive that I do, and that they need to learn in a different way than me. So I'm definitely still learning a lot. And I'm also not afraid to just take a chance. And I think that if you are a good entrepreneur, you have to take those chances. And I definitely took a chance. I mean, I literally had $4,000 and started this business. I didn't have any money saved. So that
Wow.
was a big, yeah.
Yeah, and you're always the thing I like about you is you're always looking to build the next thing, right? Like you obviously have created a company called Biz Dates where you're helping people entrepreneurs connect with entrepreneurs. You're doing live events that are centered around brain health, which I absolutely love. Talk a little bit about that. Obviously, you have an event coming up that I get the honor of speaking at in St. Pete's. Talk a little bit about that as well, and like why keep doing more things, right? Like people are always like, what's wrong with these entrepreneurs? They got to do the next thing, got to do the next thing. So talk a little bit about those things as well.
Yeah, well, when I slow down, I don't know about you. When I slow down, I get lazy.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I know that about myself. So I'm like, I just got to keep going. Like, and it's not, and what I'm doing, I love. That's also the thing is like, I always tell people when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and you're passionate about what you're doing, money comes easy. That's just money flows so easily when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and you're doing it from the passionate heart and the real reason of doing it. And that's, I have quit jobs that did not feel good with my standards and my beliefs, and I would quit them. And not because I was being lazy or didn't want to stick to it because it was hard work. It was because that did not fit who I am. And
yeah.
so my business is the same way. My partners, if they don't fit with the reasons that we're doing it, then I don't partner with them. So there's that. But also, I just feel like there's so much education that needs to be shared with people in the world. And so the live events I started 3 years ago. It's called Health to Wealth, sponsored by Braintrain Centers. And what we do is we bring in, between 20 and 40 people to a location, and we bring great speakers like you and Navid and a couple others from the Skeleton Key Mastermind and a couple great speakers I know that I've met through networking. and they talk about their specialty because I'm a master at neurofeedback. That's what I could teach at. But having a great community like yours allows me to share with my other community more benefits on how to improve their life. So we talk about how to improve health, whether it's brain health, physical health through exercise, nutrition, and then we talk about wealth. What does that look like? Whether you're an entrepreneur or not, there's ways that you could increase your wealth. And I think there's so much people can learn from people like us, is that taking chances and putting yourself out there is the way you do it. And so that's why I decided to do the live event. So this is our third annual. We just do it once a year. Not a big conference. It's more of a retreat workshop because I want people to make lasting relationships with that as well. I love connecting people. And so that's another reason I bring these live events together. And then the biz dates, I love the fact that we could bring together entrepreneurs that are on the single scene or the dating scene. And then if they don't find love at one of our events, then they could find a connection through business.
Yeah, which is great. And you know, we talked a little bit about that when we were in San Diego and how you were like, look, as an entrepreneur, it's hard to date somebody who doesn't have that same mindset. They don't necessarily have to I don't think they necessarily have to be an entrepreneur, but it's that mindset of understanding how we operate, because we operate differently. It's just the facts, right? And I love how you see a problem and you go find a solution for it, right? Like that's what you've done in all of these businesses. Now you've mentioned community a number of times during this conversation. You talked about where you grew up and kind of, hey, this was normal to me. How important has community been for you over the last 10 years of building this business and growing into the person you are now?
Oh my gosh, so important. When I moved to Georgia, I had a suitcase. Like I actually wasn't planning to move to Georgia. I was planning to just visit. I was getting away from an abusive relationship that I had been in, and my mom was there. And actually, my partner here in San Diego bought me the plane ticket because I was broke. I lost everything because I thought I was in love, right? And
Hmm.
so I didn't have a community except for my good friends, my best friends from high school, which there was just a couple here. And she's like, you have to go. So she bought me a one-way ticket to Georgia. I had one suitcase and the dog that he bought me for my birthday. And I
Wow.
restarted my whole life over. It's pretty awesome because once I got there, just like everywhere I show up, I put myself out there. It can be scary for a lot of people. It is scary for me too, even though I enjoy doing it. But you got to put yourself out there and create a community around you that's going to support you. And there are people out there that do want to support you. I had to find that out quickly because I didn't believe that at first until like Tana did that for me. So in Georgia, I actually started a network group in Georgia of entrepreneurs because I'm like, how am I going to build my business if I don't even know the businesses around me? It's kind of like moving into a neighborhood, and in the old school days, you would go take a pie to your neighbor and introduce
Yeah,
yourself. We don't do that anymore,
we
right? But
don't.
and we should. I feel like I actually know my neighbors in my neighborhood where I live. Next door app has helped me with that, but use those tools. When I started my business, I actually went around to all the neighboring businesses and I invited them to my office for a network group. And
That's
that's how I
awesome.
started creating the community that I have in Marietta, Georgia now. So much so, the other day it was kind of funny. I don't know if I'm bragging a little bit, but I was at a coffee
Brag
shop.
away. Do it.
I was at a coffee shop and I'm like standing there and I turn to talk to my partner and this woman walks by and she's like, "Are you Melissa Hergert?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "And you own Braintrain Centers?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "I follow you on Facebook. It is so amazing to meet you. Like I follow everything you're doing. Thank you so much, blah, blah, blah." And then I was like, "Well, what do you do?" And she's like, "Oh, I do like mortgage or something." I was like, "Oh, come to my women's group on Thursday." She's like, "Are you serious?" Like she was so shocked that I invited her to something that I'm part of. And I'm like, that's how it is. Like, I'm nobody special. I'm just someone that's trying to help people heal. And so, creating those communities is so important. And I wouldn't be where I am if I didn't have a community like yours, like the ones locally, like the ones I create on my own. So
I
it's,
love it.
it's a,
I love it. And the reason I ask you that is because community is everything, right? Like the people we surround ourselves with, where we spend our time, the conversations we're having. And it is hard sometimes, I think, for people to find a community that lifts them up. right? Like, and then you figure out, like, sometimes you think you're in the right community and you find out they're not obviously there to support you. Like, there's some scary things, but you have to continuously put yourself out there to actually end up finding that right group of people, which, obviously is something that you've done time and time again, both locally and nationally now. Like, I love seeing what you've done. So I want to ask you a question that I ask everybody on the show. It's a two-part question.
Right.
First part is, what is your definition of success? And the second part is, what are three things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
Ooh, oh gosh, so you're putting me on the spot. Um, my definition of success is changing one life a day. And that might not be through my business, it might be through doing something kind for someone. Um, and like having joy in your life. That's like when I feel the most successful. Is like stress is going to come, life happens, but if you're successful in what you're doing in life, then joy is going to be there. So that's how I view it. um Three things every day. I need to get better at this. There was a time when I'm going to say what I was doing, and I'm calling myself out, is exercising every day. I'm like, health, everyone get healthy. And I'm like, wait, I haven't exercised in a while. So I'm going to add that to it, because I'm going to speak it into the universe that I'm going to start doing that again and just do it. So I would say exercise every day, gratitude every day. Actually, and I started it back every day on Facebook during Thanksgiving. I always do every day the month of Thanksgiving, something I'm grateful for on social media. And one girl was like, why does everyone always do this during Thanksgiving and no other time? And I was like, oh my God, that's a good point. I'm gonna do it every day. So I've actually been doing it every day. I took a little break like the past couple of weeks, and I realized, like, oh my God, something's different. And I wasn't doing my grateful post. So being grateful, you don't have to do it on social media, but at least writing one thing you're grateful for down every day. At first it's a little bit difficult, and then it starts to get easier when you get in that mindset. And then let's see, the third one. Uh, Doing one thing every day towards the goal. So recently I shared with one of my masterminds a video that I found, and a guy said, write down 10 goals that you have over the next year, 1 year. And then from that, circle the one goal that you have, that if you had that within the next 24 hours, it would make the biggest impact in your life. And then you circle that. So that goal that I circled about a month ago, you choose one thing to do to move towards that goal every day, whether that is working out, grateful, calling a lead, making your booking your calendar properly, time slotting, things like that. So that was probably a lot, but doing the one thing to get you towards that goal that's going to make the biggest impact.
I love it. I love it. So I wrap up every single interview with the same question. But before we get there, how do people get more information about Brain Train Centers? How do they connect with you? What's all the good stuff?
Oh, good stuff. So I'm on social media, obviously. You could find me just Melissa Hergert, or you could find Braintrain Centers Inc.com is our website. So it's kind of a long website, but they didn't have braintrain.com. So Braintrain Centers Inc.com. On there, you will see tons of great information, including we just added a blog section to the website, and we just started, big props to you and me learning from you too, is we started a Brain Train Nation podcast.
Love it.
So we're recording right now, so nothing's up yet. We're recording first, and then we're going to have some episodes up, and you're going to hear from all the different partners that have come on, and other professionals like yourself we would love to have on. So you could reach us on the website, and you could contact us through there too. Email and phone number, everything's on there for every location.
I love it. I love it. So obviously, look, you've told me I've been telling you since I've known you that I got to go get this scan. Um, After this conversation, I'm like 100%. Like, I'm gonna text Naveed and be like, "Yo, dude, what's the date that we're going down to get this done?" Because him and I have been talking about it for months, being like, "Well, we got to go do it." So we just got to bite the bullet. It's like an hour from us. It's not even that far. Like, just drive down, do the scan, get lunch, drive back, whatever. You know what I mean? So absolutely love it. So like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question, and that is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
Oh man. Um, I guess I would say moving to Georgia, to be honest. Like that was a big moment of having to stand up for myself. I was in a very abusive relationship. I moved across the country and started my whole life over. So obviously that was a huge moment of growth. There's been quite a few growths since then, but that has been definitely the biggest life-changing moment, and that's why I'm here today. So I'm actually grateful for that relationship, even though it was one of the worst ones. I'm grateful for it because from every negative, you learn something. And if you don't, then that's a problem.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. Melissa, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey with my audience and your wisdom with my audience. This has been phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.